Hi guys, I'm Kevin Secor, and in this video I would like to address a few tips for helping you to counter and defend against heel hooks. Now I recognize that heel hooks in most regards are generally more of a sportive or submission fighting tactic. They are something that you're less likely to encounter on the street. That being said, in arts like combat sambo, they still do look at how leg locks and heel hooks and ankle destructions can be used in all combat scenarios. Secondly, I would like to also say that even if you're just doing this for sport and you're playing with them, you want to be extra careful with leg locks. Things like heel hooks are so destructive that even if you don't know how to do them well, even if they're messy, even if they're sloppy, they can be super dangerous. Moreover, even if your partner is applying them with all the concern and care in the world, sometimes if we move too quickly as a defender, we can tear ourselves. One of the great difficulties with leg locks is that the legs and the feet are just that little bit further away from the brain, and so we don't always feel the pain before we hear the rip. So we want to really make sure that we're going at a really prudent speed, nice and slow with lots of respect, and if for no other reason, even if we don't think this is going to be something we're likely going to face in our combative reality, if we only do it as a mental mapping skill and as another tool for expanding our understanding of our own biomechanics, I think there is value in that. So for those that are into heel hooks, here are 5 simple tips for improving your heel hook defense. Okay guys, before we get into the mechanics of defending against heel hooks, we want to look at the basic delivery and offensive application of the heel hook as well. Now there are fundamentally 2 types of heel hooks we will see. We'll either see the orthodox heel hook, where we have the leg pretty much straight in line with our body and underneath our pit, or we'll see the so-called inverse heel hook, where the leg is diagonally across the body and we're looking to address it. Now in both of those cases, the legs can do one of 4 things. We'll either see, and I'll show you on this side, we'll either see both of the legs squeezing with the thighs and the toes tucked tightly under the buttocks. Now to people that are less versed in leg locks, oftentimes they'll think that this is very easy to escape and that it's simply a matter of pushing down on the knees and sitting up. But the reality is this is an extremely fast trap to get, and if somebody's thighs are well conditioned and tight, in the time they go to sit up or try to spin, we can usually get the tear. One of the missing elements in a lot of heel hooks is that when I'm torquing that heel over, my goal of course is to rotate the heel over to cause strain to the medial ligaments or the meniscus. But one thing that's often overlooked is the role of the legs themselves. I should have at least a neutral fixed setting in the legs, but ideally move slightly in the opposite direction. So if my arm is rotating the heel this way, my knees are slightly swaying in the opposite direction. And in the thigh squeeze like this, it's very easy to see the direct capacity of the legs to go in the opposite direction. A second way of setting up the heel hook is to have this same position, but to have the outside foot posted. So this will be either posted on the hip, sometimes posted on the shoulder or the armpit, or others will post on the inside with the leg flayed open like this. So that's a second variation, what we would term a posted acquisition. Third would be to take that outside leg and to grapevine over and figure 4 under. So normally what I'm looking to do here is to use this to splay open those legs, keep this leg in a good bent position so the heel is offered to me, and then I would move from here. This foot can be there or it can be tucked underneath. And a fourth and final option, as opposed to this cloverleaf or figure 4, is a grapevine, where the same side leg is tucked underneath like that, and both of the legs start to bend. Oftentimes my free support leg will go over here, and I will go for the lock. Now all 4 of them have merits. Many schools of thought will have preferences and will tell you to do one over the other, but we want to have some familiarity with all 4 of them because defense will be based on a global understanding rather than a specific defense against a school of thought or particular stylistic interpretation. 4 variations of leg trap, or the position of the leg being either inverse or orthodox. We also have to look at the defensive capacities we have. One of the first things we can look at preemptively, generally, is the foot positioning. And that is the notion of him wanting to have my heel out and up and offered. So before he can get that sunk in, one way to protect it, of course, is to put the toe in an inverse position like this. So just like with an Achilles lock, I'm not just thinking of only moving my toes back. What I would like to do is screw the toes outward into an outward orientation, but at the same time pull the toes back. If I defend against the heel hook very well, very often I will set myself up for an Achilles lock, and he'll be able now to just wrap underneath and get an Achilles. That's part of it. But the Achilles lock is a little bit less immediately destructive, and some would argue even less destructive in the long term, as it's likely to only cause pain. It's far less likely that the Achilles lock will actually tear the Achilles, and the knee will generally be quite safe. Whereas the heel hook, even when it's half well applied, can be extremely destructive to the knee right away, and sometimes destructive to the ankle. So what I want to see is that as he's going for that heel, the first thing I would look to do is to right my foot position. And that would involve flaring the toes back out and pushing my heel through. Oftentimes people only regard pulling the toes back towards their face, but the more important element is driving my heel. So if Darren is starting to put the lock on, before it gets on fully solidly, I drive my heel forward and I pull my toes outward. And that buys me time right away. If it's well locked on, foot positioning and foot orientation is not going to be enough. But I include it here because many schools will teach that as soon as the heel hook's there, simply unscrew the leg and you'll be fine. It does work, but it's more of a preemptive strategy. The second school of thought is that when the heel hook is on, to go and hand fight and to address the hand itself. And very often, this will be done in conjunction with reorienting the foot. So as I drive my toes out and my heel forward, I would pull this arm off. And the argument there is that if the person only has one arm, they will not be able to apply a heel hook effectively. I beg to differ, right? If my legs are well squeezed in like this, and I have an understanding that I want to go in the opposite direction, if I place my heel hook arm not too deep, I don't want to go in the meat where I'm going to have kinetic loss and a lot of the force I'm generating leak away by going into the muscle, but rather I go right onto the firmness of my wrist bone. Whether or not he has control of this arm, if he's holding this wrist to keep it away, that's not going to be enough to stop me. Because here, I'll show you very gently, I'll have my blade in, and there's already a good torque here. If I start to bring my knees outward, right there, it is shearing. So hand fighting, although well intended, is rarely going to be enough to stop a really good heel hook. So the tactic that I generally seek to get once the lock is on is to orient with the sort of foot itself, to go with the direction of the heel rotation. So as he's starting to torque that leg over, what I'm looking to do in effect, and for now I'm just going to clear the legs just so you can see it as clearly as possible, I'm looking to move my body in the direction of his heel, and the moment I get here, I want to think of rubbing my foot up his body like a paintbrush. So it's extremely important when doing this kind of paintbrush escape that I don't lift in any capacity. A lot of times people will get here and they will engage their hamstring, and in doing that they'll waste time, fight against the lock itself, and get torn. So if Darren's clamping that on hard and he starts to torque, whoops, sorry about that, Darren. So he starts to torque away in this direction to go for it, I need to really push it against his body, like I'm trying to buff my foot, rub my toenails right across him. So he's going to get in very hard. Again, right now he's not addressing me with the legs, but this is the easiest first way to see it. He starts to crank it on. I rotate, I drive in, and I pull it out immediately. Now, of course, the difficulty is going to be that in an actual application, if we start with the easiest of the ones to escape, with the leg squeeze, if he's not well applied here, he starts to rotate, my free leg is still free. So what I need to look at is how can I get that leg up to a posted pop position. A lot of people will push on that leg and go into a shin stand before hopping up to a foot. But I believe this is a valuable time that's wasted. What I'd like to do is I'd like to pop that foot, that floating leg up as close as possible to my support hand. So as soon as he starts to crank, I need to pop into that position so that I'm facing away from him and already ready to grind that foot down. So, do it one more time. He's got it right here. He starts to put the crank on hard, pop, and paintbrush up. So that's the first variation that we'll generally train. After that, we'll look at what happens if he's got that posted. If this is posted on the outside, it may give him extra security, but it's going to be doing very little to stop me from doing the exact same move. If he's posting on the inside and flaying this out, this is slightly harder to get out of, so it's the next degree of resistance. Now what I have to do is I have to cuff that leg down and address it so that I can get up, but now my orientation may not be in the same alignment, and do that paintbrush move again across the front of the body. So again, he's got me flayed. All right, he's got that leg posted. He's got a good stretch on me, so I'm in a lot of pain. So right away, I want to put that down. The second I feel it, I put it down, and my top hip, I'm orienting it over here. If I lack the athleticism to get up to my foot, and I find myself kind of stumbling on my shin, it's fine. What I can do from there is focus on that top hip, rotating over, and then slide that deep into his body. But what I want you to understand is my foot is not in any way trying to lift up. it's really sliding down through. That'd be pretty rough on the groin if it was a matter of protecting my knee or not, right? So in that position again, he's here, so I would post it down and I would drive it through like that. Third variation we'll see is some degree of either a clover leaf or a grapevine. So if we see Darren here, puts that leg over. So the most common, the quickest one to get is this. This is a clover leaf or a figure 4. It's going to be slightly harder. I'm just going to move him back for camera. It's going to be slightly harder for him to get this pure grapevine if we switch legs and go here, but this is also a little tougher to escape in some cases. So what I want to see in this case, if the foot is on top, I can just post, and I'm looking to bring this leg slightly around in a very small circle, and then right away pull out, right? And what you need to understand in all these escapes is that there's very often a temptation as he's cranking to sit back. And a very beneficial drill is to understand if Darren starts to put torque on that, and I start to sit back, there's tremendous shearing power on my knee. So I never want to sit back like this, because I'll blow my own leg. What I always want to do is fall forward and drag myself away. And if it was tremendous, I would rotate a little bit and push. But rotating against the heel hook is generally a case of diminishing returns, because no matter how fast I can roll, Darren's going to be able to roll usually at least a half beat faster. He'll usually get ahead of me. So I'll show you on this side. See it for the camera. He's going to lock that up. Let's say he's got that leg over, he's got me grapevine. We're going to go very, very slowly. But if that's tight the whole way through, even if I go pretty quickly to this, if Darren does a half rotation, he's going to catch up and he's going to get me. So that notion that you can just spin away, that's only really going to work if the lock is horribly applied. If he is halfway good and he gator rolls like that with absolute impunity and aggression, he's going to tear you even if you're much, much better. So you always want to stop it at the 180 mark and then start working on sliding that out. This way, even if there's still some shear in there, you're less likely to have full pain and you're more likely to escape the majority of the power. And then finally, if it was grapevine all the way over, which again is a little harder to acquire, but you're here, if these toes are really active and alive and he's lifting up, this can take an extra half beat to get out of it, and then that buys him a little bit more time to crank. But it's the exact same escape. The only thing that's going to be a little longer is getting out of this. So in my opinion, in all 4 cases, the easiest thing to do is orient 180 degrees away and slide that leg out. The difficulty is not in the memorization of the technique. And again, regardless of what school of thought you come from, the goal of this video is to show you some very simple exercises that will help you increase your sensitivity, your flexibility, and your functional strength in those dire positions. So whether or not you choose to prioritize reorienting the foot alignment, or you still believe in hand fighting against the lock, or you seek to do some degree of rotation and paintbrushing out, I want to give you some exercises to massively increase your awareness of your leg and your ankle when it's in that dire position, and show you how to include some really great solo exercises into your fitness routine that will apply directly to your ground game. All right, guys, exercise number 1 is an absolute staple in the Russian martial art world. It is what is termed a hunter squat. So to begin, we're going to start off in this position, sort of a side sit position, what we term a shin box. And from the shin box, what we seek to do is place all of the density on the inside blade of the big toe. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to see how we can rotate and pivot off that point, pushing forward and sliding back. And as we do this, you're going to notice the heel will start to lift up towards the center line every time. What we want to do is we want to eventually rotate it slowly with awareness up to the center, and then shift our hips over and sit on that foot. And so this position, this finishing position here, is what we term a hunter squat. Now the hunter squat will also require us, as we shift our hips over, to raise that front leg up into a support frame like this. I'll show you that from every angle. So those familiar with Sistema or certain variations of Sambo, you've certainly seen this exercise a lot. But the hunter squat is fantastic because it teaches us how to transition through about 180 degrees of movement with our heel. Heel going all the way from one side to the other like a light switch. At the same time, I can start to look at how I can lift up the knee of that bent leg to get an additional stretch throughout the length of my shin and my instep. So the hunter squat is one of those drills that if you have bad knees or your ankles are really tight, first time you do it, it's going to be a little bit frightening, a little bit painful. I know it was for me when I first started in the Russian martial arts, but we want to do it very slowly and with respect, even if I need space. If I need to roll up a towel or put a pillow or a blanket there to give me some confidence so I can rest, I just need to do this a few minutes a day to get familiarity in the joints, and very, very quickly you're going to gain functional flexibility and have the ability to go through a very large range of motion with your ankle. So it's a great exercise to include in your solo ground flow. It applies not only to grappling, but it also relates directly to pivoting drills, for hand striking, and for the faceting that we need for round kicking. So it's an all-around great combative exercise. Exercise number 2 is a modified half pigeon. So we start off in that same shin box position that we started the hunter squat drill with, but now we're going to split our legs apart. So in yoga, this position is generally known as a half pigeon. What we're doing in this half pigeon can vary. I'm looking to bring my body down towards that front leg, and I can get different types of stretches, different focuses and concentrations by changing the facet of my front or top shoulder. I can look at placing my support hand under my leg. I can frame my foot and my knee with my forearms and go down. So there's a lot of variations in the basic half pigeon. What we're doing is generally termed a modified half pigeon. And the goal here is that instead of pivoting on the inside ball of the big toe like we did when going into a hunter squat, I'm going to be thinking of the support ball on the outside of the pinky toe. And I'm going to start to advance and pivot, moving the heel in the exact same way that I did in the transition to the hunter squat. But now when it gets to its maximum, I'm going to flip my heel here all the way over 180 degrees. So at about 90 degrees, it's going to be against my hip. And then finally, I'm going to invert that leg. So the first time we do this, we want to be very, very careful, because a lot of times there's a lot of fear, a lot of a lack of familiarity. When we do it or when we see it, we think, my God, I can't do that. But once I invest in it fully and I relax, my trailing leg will generally be off the ground. So I'm getting a nice stretch all throughout the inside of the bent thigh and the adductors. And I'm just really teaching that lead ankle, that front ankle, how to do a complete sort of spectrum of motion, 180 degrees in the opposite direction of what I was doing in the hunter squat. So it's a very good exercise. You can stay in that one quite static. It doesn't need to be something very dynamic. Usually I'll go into that for about 30 seconds to a minute per side, just to open up the hip and to see the relationship between the outer rotation of the heel along with the knee and the hip, so that my body starts to understand the motion. All right, guys, the third exercise that will massively improve your physical capacity for defending a heel hook is a great quadricep stretch. All you need is a wall or a similar surface. We're going to start off on both knees, and I'm going to bend up one leg, placing the instep of that leg, the toenails, if you will, up against the wall. Now what I want to do is very slowly, using my hands for support, walk out my other leg as far away from me as I can to get at least a 90-degree square position. First time you do this, you are going to struggle, and you'll see that your hips will have a hard time getting close to your heel. So you might need something solid to push off of or something solid to pull off of. But after I can get up to at least a 45-degree inclination with my torso, I'm looking at placing my hands on my body. I can use a Swiss ball or something similar, or a chair to push off as well. And I want to work on bringing my body up and as close to that wall as possible. And then when I get up to that position, I'm going to engage my tailbone and pull my ribs into my spine. So this will give you a nice deep stretch through the quadricep. Because if the quads are tight, it's going to really limit your hip mobility and a lot of the capacity to rotate in the body. This is also great from this position. After I've done this for about 30 seconds to a minute, I'll just roll out on the frame support foot onto the outer blade and put some weight on the ankle, so I can start to get an adductor stretch as well, stretching the ankle, and I can start to work on bringing my forearms down into a plank. I can roam around as I see fit. When I come out of it, I come out very gently, paintbrush that foot right down to the floor. I relax, and I usually sit on that leg just to let my hip reset. So there's a direct application to that paintbrush motion that we're going to use to escape from the last phases of that heel hook. All right, guys, the next exercise is a little bit more widely known in general fitness circles. It's what's termed a Bulgarian squat. There are many variations for the Bulgarian squat. All you really need is something to elevate your foot. Oftentimes you'll see it being done on a ledge or on a chair, but sometimes that height is a little bit extreme for people when they start. So what I'm going to start with is just a punching bag. Before you get into chairs and Swiss balls and things of a greater height, you could start just with the foot in sort of a hunter squat position on the ground, but then slowly work it up. So this is the sort of the first level of height that I would look for. So what I want to see is that my foot is comfortably rotated outward on the bag or on the support. My other foot is in a lunging position, and I move that foot to a distance where my front leg will be able to bend, maintaining a 90-degree bend, so my knee and my tibia are generally over the arch of my foot. And that squat is really great because it's a one-leg isolation, working stability on my squatting leg, but at the same time there's a load-bearing stretch going through that hip, the quadricep, and all along the front of the shin and the instep. So Bulgarian squats can be something as simple as doing 15, 16 per leg. 1 to 2 sets is usually enough. You could start with a light warm-up using a hunter squat, go to a set of Bulgarian squats, and then go back to a hunter squat or a modified half pigeon for a deeper stretch. It's a super simple and fast exercise that has lots of applications. Again, improving your pivot, direct applications to kicking application, and huge dividends on ground flow and grappling escapes. Okay guys, and the fifth exercise is what we term a hostage fly. Hostage flies are a huge staple in our ground mobility. They are tremendous for building leg strength and knee strength, but you want to be really kind and patient when you start them. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our knees about shoulder width apart. I'm going to go on an angle so you can see this well. And I want to go towards the center or outward rotation of my ankles. So I'm on the insteps, not on the balls of the feet. I want to be on the insteps, just on the nails. I'm going to engage that tailbone, pull my ribs in, keep my shoulders slightly contracted together, and very slowly try to bring all of my body, like one solid piece, backwards and then return. So it's important that we respect our limits. I want to have a range of motion that I can do 12 to 16 reps on quite easily. I want to slowly warm up my legs as it gets comfortable, and that may not be in the duration of one set. That might be over weeks of application. I can work my way back safely. Just remember, we all have the capacity to go back, but we may not be able to come back up. So you want to be respectful of that. But as the flexibility and the strength increases, your range of motion are going to change. You want to be careful that I'm not sitting and then leaning and then leaning and then rising. I want to be honest in this exercise, have the tailbone always engaged so that I feel the strength running up the front of the body. I can open the arms for additional load on the exercise, but it's a fantastic one. It builds up. The first time you do it, it's going to be a little bit shocking, a little bit frustrating, but it builds up super quickly. And again, you'll see a huge difference in your explosiveness in your legs, in your boxing, in your moving, in your sprinting, and great strength applications in all of your scissoring and push-aways on the ground. All right, guys, so there we have it. 5 really simple exercises that will pay huge dividends in all aspects of your game, from striking to the ground, but that are particularly well suited to defense and escaping the heel hook. What I always want you to remember is that regardless of what approach you take technically, no matter what school of thought you come from, nothing will be possible without biomechanical awareness and confidence. We need to have that kinesthetic intelligence. We need to understand how our body moves, and there is no better place to get that than in your own solo training. If you cannot move confidently, gracefully, and certainly in your solo work, don't expect the sudden addition of a heel hook from an aggressive partner to miraculously make you better. It's not going to. So you want to drill those exercises in your solo work. You want to find yourself a responsible, smart partner that you can safely train the moves in, and then ultimately you want to look for those to manifest in your sparring and your pressure testing. I hope you enjoyed the work, guys. As always, if you have any questions, please drop me a line. Hope to see you on the mat.